Hello and welcome. My name is Gordon Young, co-founder of The Drum. And in this session brought to you by HubSpot, we're here to discuss whether or not our industry is on the cusp of another roaring 20s. Talk of rapid economic growth may seem premature while we remain in the grip of a pandemic, but there is room for optimism. Vaccination programs may release us from lockdowns, and meanwhile, evidence shows many brands have been innovating, evolving, and investing in tech at a faster rate than ever before, meaning they are well placed to go for growth. To discuss these points and where future opportunities and challenges lie for marketers, I am joined by a panel who are brilliant examples of people who spent lockdown planning for growth. They are Chad West, Director of Marketing and Comms at Revolut; Irena Sidorova, Head of Growth Marketing at ClassPass; Lucas Bergman, Brand Director at Kazoo; Sarah Shimmons, Global Marketing Director of Diageo brand Smirnoff; Susan O'Brien, Chief Marketing Officer at Just Eat; and last but by no means least, Kip Bodnar, CMO at HubSpot. And to get things underway, I would really like to ask my panel how they have seen our business evolving over the last 12 months or so. And Chad, would you like to go first?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think sort of the key way in which our business has sort of changed in the current climate, and certainly over the last few months, has mostly been how we're targeting customers and what we're targeting them essentially to do. I think if you look at Revolut's perspective, one of the key things people do is they take a card and they go out and they physically spend. But with a number of lockdowns that's been occurring kind of all over our core markets, people have obviously been going out less frequently and making less payments, whereas we've seen a skyrocket in online payments. So what we had to do was quickly adapt from being a very physical payments focused company to putting all of our time and energy into e-commerce. And I think one of the key things we've done recently to do that is we've looked at all the data of customers to get a really good understanding of what are their favorite brands. So where do they do their food shopping? Where do they buy their clothes? Where do they typically do X, Y, and Z? And what that's allowed us to do is build a new function in the app that will prompt them with discounts and cashbacks from those brands that they love. So if we can see that you're doing your online shop at Tesco every single week, it's only logical that we're going to prompt you and say, hey, if you use Revolut, you're going to get 15% off your shop, right? Or if you're buying frequently from Amazon, or you've got a Spotify subscription, whatever it may be, we're using that data on you to make sure that we're pushing and incentivizing you to use Revolut because you're going to save money and value. And I think that's one of the key things that we're doing. I think at the same time, I think Revolut's been in a much more fortunate position than other companies in the space, in the sense that our product is quite diverse. So when you look at a lot of fintechs and digital banks, it's usually just a current account, right? It's got some analytics and things. I think when you look at Revolut, we've got obviously stock trading, we've got the ability to buy and sell cryptocurrency. So we've got far more, and these were all things that, as we know, have been booming in the last 6 months in particular. So I think what we've done is just really focused on where are the needs right now, what are customers currently doing right now, and how do we adapt to fit that? It's going incredibly well so far. We're kind of back at pre-COVID levels, which we didn't anticipate we would get there in terms of volumes right now. And then the whole strategy is sort of taking that same approach going forward this year.
That's right, and Revolut's growth has certainly been impressive. But I think another brand who's enjoyed sort of equal, impressive growth has, been Just Eat. But Susan, do you want to give us an idea of how your business has evolved?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been kind of one of the beneficiaries, if that can be called out, in terms of this terrible crisis that we still find ourselves in terms of not just responding to existing customers or consumers, but also to real behavioral change, which actually, as a marketeer, that's what you're there to try and drive and do, and get customers to change the way that they've done things before, in terms of, placing their order on the telephone versus using the app or going online. So we have been fortunate enough to be able to benefit significantly from that. And I think that some of our numbers are out there in the public domain, given that we're a FTSE listed company. And so I always have to mind myself as to what I say and when I say it in terms of timing and shareholder stuff. But we've seen hypergrowth and continue to see hypergrowth, which is great, but it hasn't been without its challenges in terms of, different markets in different stages of the pandemic at different times, and the impact that that's had on our restaurant partners in terms of them being able to keep the lights on, being able to get people to go to work. And then, of course, the all important part of our business as well as drivers and couriers to ensure that they're able to deliver safely. So we've had to pivot quite a lot in terms of our operations and indeed supporting those restaurant partners in very, very difficult times, whilst also hopefully bringing a little bit of joy to customers out there in terms of that doorbell moment and delivering them that kind of piece of normality with their takeaway and the desired food delivery. So yeah, we've been silly busy, crazy busy. It's been challenging given that you're motivating a workforce like we all are, who are at home with their own challenges, particularly where we find ourselves in this particular lockdown, additional stress, homeschooling, and that is impacting all of our employees. So it's how do we look after them as well? So there's a whole mixed gamut of how we do business and what is now deemed as business as usual. So yeah, I'm hoping that's answered your question a little bit, Gordon.
Yep, absolutely. That's been really helpful. But Irina, your business is obviously based on fitness and health. But there must be a lot of interesting insights for you, because on one hand, you're sort of very much an online business, digital, but also dependent on other sectors might have been a bit adversely affected. So what are the big lessons you've learned?
Thank you. Yes, I was when I was listening to chat and I was listening to Susan, I was like, oh God, guys, yes, I can see, of course, like we as humanity are going through like incredible, like tough period. And like circumstances have changed like for businesses, and I would say it's a ClassPass, which is online, like it's a booking aggregator for fitness and wellness services, and mostly like before the global pandemic, it is in person. It's all in-person experiences. So what do you do when in-person experiences are not possible anymore? And also like with coverage over 30 countries. So it's like, how do you, like with all their governmental changes and markets are on and off, it's a lot to deal with. So I was thinking probably in this call, the most popular word is going to be pivot, right? Because you need to adapt, and we as a business, we need to adapt where our customers are and where the audience is. And it's not just consumers, there are people who are on the subscription and who like used to go to fitness classes or book into wellness appointments. It's also our partner network, because we are a booking aggregator. So we need to make sure that we are able like to support our partners throughout all this time, and our booking platform is able to allow them to operate for this time as well. So as we've seen behavioral changes, like we've been in this space of soon to be like over a year, and the behavioral patterns change, like people start to do things differently. And we did see a shift between like exercising as like going somewhere and be somewhere is like doing like group fitness classes, which is like being physically and sharing space with someone else. So as people like shifting their habits and doing all these things online. So we as a business just needed to make sure that we are there for our customers, and we continue to add value in this experience and provide them with means to be able to change their routine and change their habits, and find the ways how to do things that make them feel good before COVID and then during COVID, and then what it's going to look like after we are going to be like on the other side, hopefully.
Yeah, and I imagine it's going to be pent-up demand is going to be, as well as pivot, pent-up demand is going to be a phrase we'll hear a lot, particularly in the fitness sector.
Yes, we did see that it's like being like mental health and physical health is important as like as another, right? Like being locked in and not being able to travel, like, or being like less active as you used to be before when you are like in COVID. Like you do need to You do need to find a ways how you can like continue those routines even when you're at home. That's good and that's important, and this is what our product is there for. But it requires a lot of self-discipline to force yourself to go for a run, or to force yourself and do like 10 squats at home, like looking at your armchair with some like clothes your husband left like from yesterday. So it's all, I feel like it's as personal like it never has been, and it does require like a lot of mental health, strength, resilience, and discipline to like wake up to the same boring day and keep pushing yourself. Again.
Yeah. And Sarah, I mean, obviously you're unique in this little panel because you're the only individual responsible for physical product. But it is a product where you've had, it's almost been a tale of two halves, where you've had on trade and off trade with very different experiences. But what have your big insights been over the last few months?
I think it's been a really interesting time, obviously, for Diageo and for Smirnoff, just because, half of the business around the world closed in a very short period of time. So trying to get on top of that is probably one of the biggest challenges we had this year, but also provided a lot of excitement. Because the rule book kind of got thrown out the door, and it was all about those behavioral shifts that we've seen. Obviously they're massive to an alcohol business, so trying to realign what you're doing and pivot into where the consumers are now going to be, so really pushing our focus onto the off-trade versus on-trade pubs, which are now closed. But also even within those behavioural shifts, there's other stuff happening. So, rather than consumers looking for those big experiences, they're looking for like little mini moments that they can have at home, etc. So we've really had to look at everything, every point of the consumer journey, basically, and try to understand a bit better how we move forward. So definitely big focuses for us, have been on like e-com, and we're very lucky at Diageo, that's something that we've had a digital focus over a number of years. So it was quite easy for us to pivot there. But also I think other big changes would be, competitors come back into view. So, where you've got 100% of the market open, you're a very clear winner, but when half of it closes, it can really change competitor dynamics. So you can suddenly find you've got a very new competitive set or new players in there that you weren't expecting to be so strong once you close that half of your business. So the focus has really been on the competitors as well, and looking at like getting that laser sharp focus in on what's going on in that part of the market, which has been really exciting, because you don't always get the opportunity to have that level of focus. So yeah, that's been the focus over the last while.
Yeah, it's also been interesting to see Diageo as a group investing in the on-trade as well, to make sure that there's an on-trade to come back to after the pandemic.
Yeah, because I think, we're all aware, I'm sure everyone feels the same, is, there's a lot of pent up energy around, and we have real belief in the on-trade, and that's going to come back in a big way. And of course we want to support the pubs that are there. So we've been doing a lot in that space, obviously, to support those that can't open, and making sure that they're still there when we do get back to the swing.
Yeah, and I'm for one, I'm looking forward to supporting them as well when they open.
Me too, I can't wait.
But look at you again. You're in a slightly different position, because while everyone's sort of adapting existing businesses, you've been sort of in the process of launching a new brand.
Sure, yeah. So Kazoo's only been trading for just over a year, so we've probably had more trading months in the pandemic than not, really. So we first sold our first car in December 2019. We went on air right at the start of February last year. So we had 8 weeks of normality, let's say, before the pandemic hit. So we don't really know anything different. We don't have a kind of a normal year to compare it against, really. So we had a period of maybe 4 to 6 weeks where effectively the whole kind of car retail sector shut down. We had to adapt a lot of our processes to be COVID safe for our employees as well as our customers. But come really about June time, things bounced back pretty quickly, and so the second half of the year was generally fairly fine for us, sort of in line with what we hoped it would be. We as a kind of e-commerce business could adapt really quickly. Even with the most recent shutdown, we can still deliver cars to customers' homes or even do click and collect. So it's hard to say whether, no doubt there's kind of anecdotally plenty of customers that felt that they should give online buying of a used car a go, and they might otherwise not have done because that felt that was a much better choice for them than visiting a dealership because of COVID. But it's hard to tell what might have happened differently otherwise. But no, it's been our first year of trading. It's gone really, really well, and we're probably in some respects one of the beneficiaries of the pandemic, and we've been really well placed, really.
Yeah, I suppose it is one of those things. It's probably been quite a good time to launch an online service like this, isn't it? I mean, people are reluctant to go to showrooms, so timing's been good, but maybe for sad reasons. Yeah,
I think so. I think it is a big decision for someone to decide to buy a used car generally anyway. It's a lot of money involved. So the decision to buy it online as opposed to in a showroom, that is a very big kind of shift in behavior for consumers to do. Effectively, they're spending thousands of pounds on something they haven't even seen or touched before. So it's still quite a big shift for a customer to make. So we wouldn't expect, large proportions of the market to shift our way in that period of time. But certainly, we're really happy with the number of people that have come and give it some serious consideration.
Yeah, it's great. I think the one thing sort of unites us all is this sort of greater emphasis on data and digital. And Kip, you're obviously very much at the heart of that whole ecosystem.
Yeah, when I think about the past few months, even the past year, at HubSpot we provide a CRM platform to companies who are trying to grow, and wow, we just saw companies around the world having to operate differently, right? People who were used to having their customer success or sales or marketing teams in one space are now distributed, having to do remote, having to collaborate, and really wanting to adopt a platform to kind of do all of that together on and kind of have one shared space and user experience to do that. The other thing that we saw that was really, expected, but we didn't think about ahead of time, is that everyone was just trying to navigate what good looked like in this new world. Right? There's just so much uncertainty that what we basically did is we took all of the data across our, what was then 80,000 plus customers and looked at how they were doing, how their marketing was performing, sales was performing, give people some benchmarks of like company size, industry. If you follow one of these buckets, this is what your email open rates kind of look like at a broad industry benchmark, or your sales rep email response rates look like, or your close rates may look like. And we found that to be hugely helpful to everybody. It just provided some level of stability and clarity in this hyper changing world and hyper changing time. And obviously different industries were impacted differently, but everybody was trying to get their footing and trying to be resilient and adapt to this new normal. And I think one of the things that was huge in doing that beyond technology is actually data and insights to know what to do.
Yeah, data and insights is obviously, everyone's talking about data, experience, sales pipelines, account-based marketing. But do you think it's fair that actually the marketing as a discipline is now the primary discipline of business? We're basically all marketers now. I don't know if you've any views on that, Sarah, from a business which has been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think you're right in a way. Like there's a lot of different ways to do marketing, and marketing is just doing business. And, I've always thought that I don't think that there's, especially in startup environments and other business types, I think it's just about getting business done, and marketing has always been part of that. So I don't see it as a big leap to go from, marketing in a small business to marketing in a big business. I've actually done both, and, it's the same. So I think, yeah, marketing has always kind of been at the heart of what businesses do. So I can see how it is becoming more relevant. And I see people, it's really interesting for me because especially in the health and fitness industry, I see a lot of like local health and fitness influencers, and they're really getting into business now. And some of the marketing that I'm seeing, it's not necessarily what big brands would do that 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 Diageo have, but it's certainly stuff I can learn from. So I'm learning a lot from how those influencers sort of, you know, brand themselves, market themselves online, are super focused in on social ads, etc. Like there's a lot that I can learn from that as well. So I definitely think you know, it's a great time for marketing, and yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it. It doesn't always have to be from the big guys, you know.
Yeah, and what do you think, Chad? Do you sort of agree that you know, the role of marketing is deemed to be more important than it maybe was a few years ago?
Potentially. I think you can look at the industry and you can often, depending on what sector you're looking at, marketing can be kind of king, and it can easily be the opposite, right? But I think the good thing is there's a huge amount of challenge ahead. I think the reality is, you know, a lot of companies are probably really already prepared for what 2021 looked like, and we're building their roadmaps and their strategies, and now they're going back to you know, basically to step one, and those results still have to be hit. So while I do think it's exciting, of course, and it's a challenge, I think the reality is it's going to be a very, very big challenge. And 2021 will be quite a difficult year for marketers, particularly those who are pivoting drastically. So I think, you know, the challenge when I look at it from a Revolut perspective is, I mean, data. We are data mad. We always have been. We're very vocal about that. I think, you know, people here who are from the tech industry will probably agree with that in their senses as well. But everything we do has to be monitored, measured. There has to be results. That, you know, where possible, we have to have automation. And I think, you know, probably a prime example I gave you was, I mean, how many brands have you signed up to and they send you stuff that just doesn't make any sense, right? It's not, they're not incentive, they're not showing you a brand or a discount that's applicable to you or relevant. They're just throwing stuff out, hoping something sticks. So if you look at, for example, that new whole reward section that we've built, which has most brands you can think of have wanted to sign up to it, from beer companies like BrewDog to, you know, food companies like HelloFresh. But it's based on data, right? So we're going to be able to actually look at your transactions, and then that will be reflected in there. And that's just an example of taking a very basic, simple data set, but applying it to the customer experience to ensure that that's going to be a positive situation. And they're not going to think, oh, what a shitty feature, like spamming me with stuff I don't need and getting rid of it. So I think given that it'll be a more difficult year, I think data will probably be more important than it ever has been in marketing. And I think when you look at the marketing teams who maybe aren't as technical or aren't as data driven, historically, I think whether they like it or not, that's probably going to have to change.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. So maybe what we're seeing is actually, you know, the data scientists are becoming the marketers as opposed to marketers. You know, maybe it's the other way around, where the marketers are turning to data scientists. Susan, I mean, obviously, Susan, your sort of business is is another example. In fact, everyone here are good examples of businesses which are very tech and data driven.
Sure.
But have you noticed that the skill sets now required to be successful in this environment, you know, to what extent are they changing?
Wow, that's a massive question, Gordon. We could probably spend the next hour maybe the next day talking about that. Yeah. I think, look, what I would say is a word of caution, I think, really. And I'm not saying it to be provocative on this panel, but I think that, you know, I often talk about, and I run the insights team as well at Just Eat, and I often talk about the importance of insight, the importance of data. But there's also the importance of just staying in touch with reality and, you use the word pivot again, being able to pivot to what, you know, our customers are telling us, you know, not just the data, but kind of that real gut feel of what's going on around you, and playing that out in terms of whether that's the timeliness of launching a new campaign or a new feature or what have you. But the reason why I say that is that in this world where we're all data mad, and honestly, sometimes you don't even know where to start. I don't know if any of the other marketeers on the call here, it's like you're drowning in this stuff. It's like, oh, I don't know which way to go. I think that never is a time now where the importance of emotionally connecting with a customer is more important than it ever was. And I think what that does in a world is kind of elevates the importance of creativity. And so I'm not saying, you know, to be creative for creative's sake, that's kind of being creative, responding to what that data is telling you, but to try and, you know, essentially do marketing that emotionally connects with people, those are going to be the winning brands. Because as everybody gets to that point where they've got so much data, so much insight, it's like, oh, where do I turn? It's really about how do I make, and I'm talking to you, Gordon, but how do I make you feel? How do I make Chad feel? How do we make people feel such that in a world where everything's equal, particularly in a kind of, certainly the category that I'm in, how do we make a difference and how do we punch above our weight? So I think what's going to be really important in 2021 is creativity and how, we use that. And I don't just mean, a TV ad. I just mean in every single way that you are creatively looking at a problem, because I think this year's going to be harder than last year. I think that where we find ourselves today, I don't want to be depressing because I am a known optimist, and as most marketeers are, our glass is normally half full, but I think people are more stressed. I think that, the mental health and the state of where people find themselves and this kind of tediousness that we now in lockdown and with curfews in other markets as well, this is really, really hard. So how do you make your brand relevant to those people at a time when people are really low? So I'm looking at Sarah and I'm thinking, God, I can't wait for when the pub's going to open. I can't wait for when I can be with my friends and we can essentially drown our sorrows. That feels like a long time away, and I think that you're right, Sarah. You're going to benefit when we come out the other side because people are going to party like mad. And so it's kind of, I don't know, I just think that the power of creativity is going to be really important this year. I don't know whether anyone wants to challenge or
no, I really agree with you. You definitely hit a chord with me because I think, it totally depends on what your product is as well. But similar to you, in a world where like I'm in the world of vodka, it all looks the same, it all tastes the same, let's face it. That element of creativity is what is going to differentiate you at the end of the day, even when you are the biggest brand. Like we're the biggest brand in the world, but yet we need that hook to get us past some of the competitors that are out there. So I think that creativity point is really key. And I think people are looking for experiences and for brands to give them more than just the brand.
Yeah.
And I don't mean experiences like out of home experiences, but they want something that's sensorial, or for example, through flavor, or they want something that just gives them a feeling. Which obviously you're not necessarily going to get to with just your data choices. So I think that that point really resonates with me on the
Yeah.
I think, can I just add to that point there with Sarah as well? I think there's a real piece there as well that creativity can help you with, which is around talkability and shareability. So if you're creating that extra something, you're going to get people talking. So you're going to get natural exposure and kind of free media, for want of a better word, because you're creating stuff that people want to talk about, and so I think that that's also going to be a challenge for this year is, as you said, in a world where everything's equal. I thought you were drinking some vodka there, Sarah.
It's a bit early, but
and, where it's kind of like, it's the same thing. What makes me choose you versus somebody else? And then how do you create the stories around it? So, yeah.
I think a really relevant point of data is the stuff that data can tell you, particularly about what's happened in the past, but there's a load of stuff it can't tell you, particularly if you're genuinely trying to change things in a completely new way that even customers probably couldn't imagine. Like we're very much an entrepreneurial business. Our founders are kind of serial entrepreneur. The whole point of what we're doing is that it could never have been predicted by any kind of data or even asking customers what they're looking for. So if you're really radically trying to change customer behaviors, you've got to take some risks. You've got to take some leaps that data might well have told you to do exactly the opposite, actually. So you've got to take, there's an element of creativity and risk taking and just trying things that you either feel or that it is ultimately what's going to benefit from the customer, and then you'll find out if it doesn't work, you try something else. So that's a limitation, particularly in our category as well. Actually, the category level data that you're going to find is pretty patchy, so there's not really much to go on a lot of the time. So you kind of got to listen to your customers and understand what's going to keep them happy.
In a world of
I think the base as well. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
No, I was just saying, like in a world of algorithms and data, right? Like everybody's just continuing to get more and more of what they know about and what they think they want.
Yeah.
And if you're really going to stand out, you have to give somebody what they do not yet know they want. and the scarcity of that is only increasing, and it's only going to continue to increase. And so if you're going to do remarkable marketing, sure, there's a baseline of what you have to do in terms of giving people what they want, but it's the brands that are going to be able to disrupt and say, create an experience the consumer just hadn't even thought about yet that's really going to change the landscape.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it was also a really good point, Suze, about the point of purpose. You've got to remember the people at the other end of that communication, or the data is actually people at the end of the day, and obviously people have been through a pretty hard time. I suppose, Irina, your brand in the space you're in, as we've already mentioned, the whole issue, for instance, around mental health is quite important. Is that, do you sort of, obviously your communications strategy takes that into account?
Yes, of course, I think kind of like to add to the data and the skills and communication and marketing, I think like there's the challenge that marketers face in 2020 and 21, when actually the amount of channels that people, like the user, is exposed to, or the audience is exposed to, has changed significantly because of the lack of travel, or change in the experiences and change in in behaviors and the way the day-to-day looks like. So that's very important. Like where do you communicate to your audience, and who is your audience, and like what are they looking for? But then also being able to clearly communicate what's the problem your brand is trying to solve, like, or what's your product, like what problem your product is solving, like is this clear, is this transparent, and does this resonate with the needs the audience has at that point of time? And also like very much sympathize to the feeling of data paralysis when there is so much data that it's like sometimes like really hard to make decision as in like what exactly. And then they're like being the human and being creative and use common sense and knowing that you're not just a marketer, but you're also the audience as well. Kind of like feel like knowing what your audience needs based on you, like even like resonating with this on a personal level, because we are all going through the same experiences, and kind of like being always able to detach from what the business is to like what you actually as a human feel, because the moment that we are all living through is so unique, and it's so important to recognize that the challenges are not individual, the challenges are collective. So probably kind of like solving the problem on an individual level, you can really like come up with a group decision as well, which will eventually help you to win more hearts and kind of like could like fuel further your brand growth.
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it, Kip, that actually there's, with so much data now available and so much tech at their disposal, there must be a real risk that marketers are just going to be overwhelmed with all this sort of all this information technology.
Yeah, I think marketers have been overwhelmed, for quite a while. I think as soon as online marketing really came to be, and none of the traditional offline channels went away, it just created a whole level of overwhelmed behavior. And I think it goes a lot back to what Susan was saying, where it's like the basics of marketing still hold true. You have to have creative and differentiated stories, and you have to have novel and interesting ways to distribute those stories, and you need to reduce friction for your customers. And the last one is, I think, what's really changed in the last few years is that consumer experience has really gotten into the world of marketing deeply, and things like marketing automation, things like website personalization, all of those things have come into play and kind of broaden the marketer's area of focus. But those are like the three things you ultimately have to do as a marketer. And then what we have to do is focus on our executions. We can't do everything. We can't do events and automation and websites, and like we have to focus on what are the core areas of investment that we're going to make in a given year, and how we're going to kind of build on those year after year. but I don't know about you all, but I feel overwhelmed quite a lot. There's no shortage of new opportunities to take advantage of. But the reality is if you don't focus, then not all of those opportunities are just going to fall short because you just don't have the level of focus and execution to make them successful.
Yeah, and obviously the world is in some ways much more complex, and I suppose I'm looking at looking at maybe the 3 or 4 of you are launching or working in relatively new online businesses. But Lucas, when you're sort of setting up a business and selling secondhand cars online, seems a simple idea, but there must be a lot of complexity, in terms of running that business in reality. What do you think are the governing principles about taking a business online? Have you any sort of top tips you'd give anybody from considering making the move from an old-fashioned traditional business to turning on to an online business?
Sure. I mean, I guess even the part of the fact that it's online, look at what sector you're in. What are the problems that customers have got? Are there areas that people are in some way dissatisfied, and how are you fixing those problems? And as often is the case, an online business is really well set up to do that. So as is true of a lot of categories, having a much broader range of products available, the convenience of having it delivered to your home, not having to go to lots of different dealerships is a kind of relevance to the car piece. But also there's specific issues in used cars around lack of transparency of car quality, lack of trust around car quality, transparency around pricing and finance deals. These are all things that online is really well set up to be able to offer. So, but it also comes with challenges, right? There is a challenge around the fact that we're asking people to buy a car based on a very good online experience, but it's ultimately not a physical experience of seeing a car and test driving a car. So we have to over deliver on transparency, on the quality of imagery, on the whole UX, so that we can kind of overcompensate for the lack of a physical experience as well. So it's that kind of, what are the real benefits that you can deliver that really out deliver the kind of what exists in the category already.
Yeah, and is that similar sort of case from your perspective, Chad? Transparency is obviously more important. What do you think are the defining principles in running a sort of an online business as opposed to an offline one? And I think you might be in mute.
There's always one, right? No, I think it's a good point. I mean, I think for us, it's similar to Lucas, a very dated old industry that was in need of a shakeup. I think that's happening. And I think the inevitability was that banking was always going to go online. And it's quite a bold statement to make right now, but you're seeing week after week major bank announcing 500 closures of branches, and that will continue to happen, right, over time. So I think the benefit we have is, when I look at companies like Revolut and even others like Monzo and whatnot, we're sort of got a 5-year head start because we're built digital from the ground up. And I think one of the things I'm always very cautious about, when I've very lucky to have great friends and mentors across, big US tech companies. And I think we were having a chat about this last week, and there comes often an inevitability where you get comfortable. And that's one thing I'm always encouraging my team is we do not want to be another one of those tech companies that, once you hit certain numbers, you're like, job done, right? And the innovation and the speed, the two things that have been our key to success, are not the most important thing anymore. And I mean, you've seen it in a lot of companies where they get, the people who built it year 1 to 5 sort of hop off and do their own thing. And the consultants and the execs from the big industry come in, and the company's innovation goes out the window. Bureaucracy and red tape is everywhere. So I think that's one of the key things for us, is just not to get complacent and just think that, because we're doing very innovative things now and we're tech driven, we're data driven, that's the immediate key to success. And I think the only other point I'd mention just briefly is the importance. Again, I actually am very much for this of finding that balance between sort of brand marketing and data, right? A lot of companies can go too far on what they call growth these days, right? Of making everything automated and everything's technical. And as I think it was Susan who rightly said, your emotion and what you stand for as a company goes completely out the window. And that's another challenge for us as well in our industry, because I think we are I'm probably in the most regulated industry here, I think, in terms of, the pure, I can't even begin to describe, right, how everything has to go through so many committees and different things. So what's important for me going forward is making sure that we don't lose sight of what made us great, which was being community focused and customer obsessed, because it's very easy to fall off that slope and go down that route. So yeah, I'll park it there. But
that's great. Well, we're just about out of time actually, but before we go, maybe one more question for you, with hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel now in sight in terms of the pandemic. What are your predictions going forward? Do you believe actually we could be looking at another roaring 20s? Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first, Irina?
Sure. I mean, predictions. It's hard to predict. Whatever you predict, like plans change in the next 2 months, right? But I think there are two kind of like main trends what we identified for ourselves as in like within the industry is that kind of like marketing is going to be local, and the businesses needs to be agile and be able to adapt to deliver value locally. So it's like from globalization, we are all in the massive localization, and we know that we need to be flexible. We need to be able to respond to their kind of like change in regulations or change in like market conditions. And we need to make sure that we are able there to be there and support as our partners, so our customers. And also there's the prediction, but I feel like it's not a prediction, it is a turning on into reality. It is like the products need to be like a hybrid version of offline and online, because I think there is nothing more precious nowadays than like all this lack of physical experiences that we used to have before, but potentially future is just like a hybrid of physical and online, and the winners will be the one who will be able like to find the best balance and to continue to add value in this kind of like consumer journey.
That's great. Suzo, what are your sort of predictions? Are you optimistic, or are we heading for a roaring 20s?
I mean, I think I started this conversation by saying I feel like I'm one of the fortunate ones. I've got, I'm working in a category that is flying. But I do think I want to kind of put a word of caution, because I do think that whilst we can see light at the end of the tunnel, thank God, I think that, we're all fortunate to be in jobs and be challenged and motivated and pivoting. But I think it's really important that as a brand, you know your place in the world, and you need to make sure that you remain relevant and cognizant of the national mood where you're operating in. So I think that, yeah, my word of caution, this is going to be a tricky year. It's a very, it's a sad time for people, and it's, we all want to be optimistic. We all want to get together. And I think that that's just natural, human behavior. We've been so tightly restricted for so long. I think that, it's tough, and people are really, really fed up. But, on the positivity, it's down to us as marketeers to make sure that we add some of that joy into people's life, and we bring some of that normality into people's life and hope. So yeah, I think just be mindful of our place as a brand in the world of kind of consumers. And I would probably say the opposite to Irina in that we are not the target audience. And I think you do need to stay close to your customers, because I think that we are on the whole quite privileged. So that would be not really a prediction. It's just kind of where I feel.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. Sarah, what do you think? Are you optimistic?
I am optimistic, but yeah, I think I'm just an inherently optimistic person anyway. I think it is going to be a tricky year, especially how we've started off this year. I think, I felt a lot more positive in early December than I do now with various things happening with COVID. So I think it will be a tough year, but I do think there are opportunities out there to connect with consumers and make sure that, we are bringing a bit of that light to people in whatever way we can, a bit of fun to them during this difficult time. But I think, yeah, it could take a long while within this year to get to somewhere a bit more positive. But I think I also don't believe in this new normal that everyone's talking about. It's like my most hated word of 2020 was the new normal, because I think this will pass, and what will happen afterwards, there will be a lot of positivity. People will want to go out again. You know, this isn't creating new ways of living for people. I really don't believe that. I think there were certain things that were bubbling before this. You know, people were living in more like mini moments and wanting those little moments to connect rather than big ones. And I think that was already, those trends were there before COVID, and I think they'll be there afterwards. But I don't think we're going to see huge changes in behavior over the longer term. So I think that's good news for a business like ours. So,
yeah, no, good. Thanks for that. So no new normal. Chad, what do you reckon? What's the future hold for us?
Yeah, I think Sarah's spot on there. I'm sick and tired of negative people saying, "Oh, the world's gonna be like this. It's never gonna be the same." I'm not as doom and gloom as that, despite being Scottish. I'm not as doom and gloom. I think for me, it comes in two aspects. I think one, I think it's a year of experimentation for marketers. I think one thing I'm doing, and I know a lot of my colleagues and other companies are doing, is encouraging trying and testing new things. I think a lot of people are going back to the drawing board. They've got a bit more perhaps leniency on what their strategy looks like for this year. And there's a lot of experimentation going on. I certainly know there is in Revolut. And I think that's a great thing, because I think as marketers, we can often get stuck in, well, we've always done it this way. Or, you know, and I don't like that. I think it's always good to go out there and experiment a little. I think the second point is it'll be a year from brands of empathy. And what I mean is hopefully not fake empathy. I think you're seeing, you know, even if I look at Revolut's perspective, we're working on like setting up vulnerable customer teams and eliminating any fees for late payments and all these kind of things that we're doing. And you can see that shift taking across the industry. And where brands aren't doing it, they're getting called out on it. I think if you look at student accommodation companies and others who have been getting a lot of stick. So I think this is a year where companies might start becoming more empathetic and doing so in a sincere way, I hope, as opposed to trying to jump on a bandwagon.
Okay. And Lucas, what's your outlook?
Well, yeah, like Irina said, I'm just, you know, not in the business of making predictions, certainly not anymore. But I think it's going to be a really tough year this year for sure. I think there'll be kind of similarities to what happened a bit last year as we came out of the first lockdown, and it just was really hard. There's never a moment where, you know, day one to day two, suddenly everything's open and fine. It will be gradual, and no one really knows when it's going to happen. And yep, I'm a natural optimist, but you can't keep away from the fact that there will be a recession and some fairly heavy unemployment numbers. So could be pretty choppy, but plenty to be positive about, I think, as well. I think a lot of the kind of positive trends that have happened will stick. So, you know, I'm sure we'll be going back into an office, but maybe not 5 days a week. You know, things like home working, there are positive things that probably should have happened years ago. And then for us, you know, any shift to e-commerce, I think a lot of those trends will also stick. But then, you know, people are really, really keen to get back to things that are never going to be as good online. So meeting up face to face, having those fantastic kind of on-trade experiences, I think we all can't wait. So plenty to be positive about, but, you know, with a heavy dose of caution, I'd say.
Right. And Kip, last word to you.
I'm in line with lots of folks that this year is going to be hard. I think it will gradually get better every month, and we will move into 2022 in a time of new optimism. I think all this new optimism is and new behavior and change in how we all live and work is going to bring a lot of new regulation over the next few years. And I think we don't talk a lot about data privacy, security, all of those regulatory issues are going to be front and center, I think, over the first half of the decade.
Well, that's great. Well, guys, that's all we've got time for, but thanks again for these fantastic insights. Brilliant stuff. Chad, Irina, Lucas, Sarah, Susan, and Kip. So if not quite the roaring 20s, there is still reason for real optimism. Goodbye.